This is going to be my reaction to the Detroit Lions 27-24 loss to the Vikings, a home loss in the division where Detroit clearly misses an opportunity to either get ahead technically in the division or draw even with the Packers, however that works out because of the tie that the Packers have. Not only do you drop a home game to the Vikings, Vikings only produced 259 yards because it got short field 3 times. Detroit also suffers possibly some difficult losses on the offensive line. Got abused on special teams, which I think is surprising. We've come to expect them to generally be pretty solid in the last 2 or 3 years. This one was very one-sided from a special teams standpoint. What the Vikings return team was able to do, the blocked field goal in the fourth quarter. I mean, we can sit here and say you add 3 points to the Lions' score and it ends up being a tie game. It certainly impacts the way the rest of the game flowed out because Minnesota was able to get a short field and score once again. I think this one's about as disappointing as you can imagine, in my opinion. It's tough. It's just tough to watch a talented offense get disrupted at every turn. There was no real flow to the offense today. Maybe from a play calling standpoint, you could say that, but certainly from a run game standpoint, pass protection was disrupted. Basically, the inside linebackers were knifing through or taking on Jahmyr Gibbs in such a violent fashion. It seemed to me to be quite intentional to force Gibbs and or Montgomery to have to allocate themselves in pass pro, but I felt like it happened more often when Gibbs was on the field. We won't know really until the all-22 or end zone angle film comes out. You have to give credit to Brian Flores and their defense. They took the game over. At times, it was like all Tom Brady could do was talk about McCarthy and O'Connell. Man, to me, from the outside looking in, Flores and their defensive group the last couple years, they've been the key to that team completely. They sacked Goff 5 times, pressured him a bunch of others. The double inside linebacker blitzes, they cause severe problems on the inside. Guard, center guard, and then the running back. I don't pretend to know exactly the calls that were made, nor what should have been made. I can't offer comment on that. All I know is it really worked. Even organic 4-man rushes later on in the game had an impact. The Lions' offensive line clearly struggled in pass pro on the same day when the run game, was totally shut down. If you're not aware, 65 yards rushing produced between Gibbs and Montgomery on 20 carries. The entire flow process of the offense was disrupted. And I have to say, I think Flores and his staff, I should say, that they did a really good job of not doing things during this game from a blitz standpoint, not giving Goff the same looks, basically. Forcing Goff's pre-snap determinations to not be as fluid. Goff is one of the best, in my opinion, at recognizing, seeing things pre-snap, getting in the right look. Just didn't look as comfortable today. Do I think the offensive line had something to do with that? Of course. I also suspect, I can't prove it, that Flores and the defensive staff changed some things up so that Goff, wasn't as comfortable with that pre-snap to pro-snap transition as he has been against Minnesota for the last 2 years. Along with all of that, you have this perfect storm of special teams issues. I mean, the block kick in the fourth quarter, it handed Minnesota the short field for the 3rd time. You have the first kickoff of the game after Detroit goes down and scores, basically the Sam Laporta drive. A 61-yard return on the ensuing kickoff by, I think it's Miles Price. Bates was in on that tackle, if I recall. And then, nobody tackled Price, obviously, on the last play of the third quarter, the kickoff after Detroit's able to close to 24-17 on a field goal. It could have been, it was a 99-yard touchdown that got called back for a penalty. To me, another indication of the special teams problems that showed up today multiple times, at least those 3. If not others. I should add that, Detroit was called for 10 penalties, totaling, I think, 76 yards. I believe there was one other that was declined. I think you have to encapsulate it as a very sloppy, uninspired performance, particularly by the offense and the special teams. Now, McCarthy and those guys get 2 touchdowns to open the game, so you have to give them credit for that and some opportunities to analyze or perhaps be critical of Shepard's defense. But I thought those guys fought on the defensive side. Terrion Arnold had his first career interception on, I think, a spectacular play. Jack Campbell played just another whale of a football game. Aiden Hutchinson gave everyone problems. In my opinion, there were times where the Vikings got things done maybe a little bit too easily, sure. But I thought the defensive side battled and gave the team a chance to win or at least compete today when otherwise the offense was subpar, below their standard clearly, and the special teams essentially stunk for most of the day. Now you're 5-3 with a missed opportunity since Green Bay lost. And then the Bears got that wild win in Cincinnati. I think it ended up being 46-42 or 47-42, something like that. A huge, I should say, window of opportunity might be closed. And what I mean by that is to get to 6-2, technically ahead of or tied or just behind Green Bay, whatever that dynamic is, this is a bad loss. About as bad a loss as, I know at the time it wasn't looked like it, but I was following Detroit late in 2022 and had high expectations for the team. That road loss to the Carolina Panthers, I think like 37-24, 35-22, something like that, 13-point margin. That one was disappointing to me because really that's the difference between getting in the playoffs and not that season with their Week 18 win in Lambeau Field. I thought Minnesota outplayed Detroit for 45 to 48 minutes of the game today. Maybe that's too much in your opinion, but a large chunk of the game they're in control. They're the more physical team, playing under control. I believe they also had 7 penalties. I thought that the physicality up front, O-line and D-line, and inside linebackers, they controlled that aspect of the game, and that's surprising. Brady kept mentioning it. It sounded like their head coach O'Connell talked about it. That's great, Kevin, you did. But really the side that dominated, the side that put their stamp on the game was the defense for Minnesota. This is what Brian Flores does. They offensively, they only generated 259 yards on, I think, 60 plays, maybe 59. So it's 4.4 yards per play, right? McCarthy goes 14 of 25 for only 143 yards. He did have the 2 early touchdowns, and then the 9-yard scramble for a score when it's a difficult play to not be critical of, or it's an easy play to criticize, I guess is a better way for me to phrase it. It's an end and a tackle stunt by Hutchinson, and I think it's Muhammad who's on at D-tackle. A lot of similarities to a touchdown run that I think Justin Fields had late in 2023, like maybe week 12 or week 13, where Hutchinson goes to the inside, Fields is able to escape out and scramble for a touchdown, kind of the right side of the end zone, going left to right, at least from an all-22 film perspective. Usually here, Anzalone comes up and makes the tackle. I think you've got to give credit to McCarthy on one level that he's able to outpace Anzalone to the sideline. That hasn't happened very often. And look, this is the same Lions team that came to Baltimore and was able to control Lamar Jackson from a scrambling perspective. So to have McCarthy get that touchdown is a little bit surprising. I do wonder, that one put him up, I think, 24-14. That was after the fumble by Montgomery in the second half. I have to say, or wonder about the call there, that stunt. Usually you would get against an athletic quarterback this season, Kelvin Shepard would use that, what I refer to as a 3+1 with possibility of a spy in Barnes. They did not do that. I think Barnes is on the field, but he's rushing against the left tackle, and I just don't think that's a productive use of Barnes. He's not an accomplished pass rusher. He hasn't been getting wins in that manner. He's been getting sacks through effort sacks or situations where the quarterback has had to redirect from someone else getting initial pressure. I would have liked to have seen their 3+1 scheme used there because we know that Barnes could corral or tackle McCarthy out in space. He had done it once, I think, during the first quarter. That whole sequence there, to be honest with you, was very uncharacteristic of this Lions team in 2025, but globally, since they've become, one of the best teams in the league in 2023, but really dating back to the latter half of 2022. I'm talking about the struggles on offense, but also the fumble by Montgomery. It's a 3rd and 13 from their own 6. So I don't know about you. We're not even expecting them to convert or have an opportunity to. All of a sudden, on the little pitch play into the boundary, he's got space, and it looks promising. First of all, Montgomery's great at reading the blocks in front of him, finding an extra 4, 5, 6 yards by hedging to one side or the other. And then all of a sudden, Blake Cashman comes out of nowhere. He punches the ball out from behind. I believe it's right as Montgomery approaches the line to gain, which would have been the 19-yard line. Just a real microcosm of the day. And that some things that don't often occur for Dan Campbell's football team did. The penalties were an issue in the preseason. We've had some games this year where they popped up. 10 penalties for 76 yards really became a thorn in the side at certain times. In previous years, they've had trouble with athletic quarterbacks. That whole sequence, the fumble by Montgomery, and then the third down scramble, I think it's a 3rd and 8 from the 9-yard line for McCarthy. This year, the 3+1 spy and Barnes' impact, they haven't had as much trouble against athletic quarterbacks, to my knowledge. So it's just a total outlier from what we have seen from this defense, and on a day when generally I think Shepard's group played pretty well. Yes, they did give up 27 points, didn't give up many yards. Frustrating, I think, and possibly one that Shepard will look back at and wonder if, maybe he could have played a different stunt up front. Essentially, Muhammad doesn't get upfield enough, but he's got a tough job. He's going through B-gap, so he's got to fight off the tackle and try to get upfield. McCarthy is, perhaps an underrated athlete. He's able to escape, identify it, get outside. Like I said, very reminiscent of, I believe it was Fields' a touchdown run in a loss in Chicago late 2023, perhaps week 12 or week 13. But in any case, that pushed the lead to 24-14 in the third quarter. I think it's like 6 minutes left in the third quarter. So there's a lot of game left, right? But that 10-point margin at that point really ended up being the difference, meaning you didn't have much of a margin for error in the final 20 or 21 minutes. I know that the Lions got that field goal from Bates late in the third quarter to make it 24-17. Look, Goff was sacked twice on that drive. And in fact, he was sacked on the play leading up to the field goal by Bates that, like I said, gets them to within 7. The field had been shortened there for Detroit. The kickoff return by Saylor was like 38 or 39 yards. So even to get within 24-17 was a struggle, and they were kind of boosted up by that kick return by Saylor. I thought Minnesota outplayed them for most of the game. Still, that 99-yard kick return, I couldn't believe it was happening as I saw it occur. Fortunately, it was called back. I didn't see the penalty. I'm not saying there was no penalty, but I didn't see a replay. Perhaps they did show a replay, and I was typing on my second screen. But in any case, it's 24-17, and you would think that you've got an opportunity once you get a sack and force them to punt. Basically, it's a badass play. Jack Campbell blitzes. He blitzed 3 or 4 times today. I thought each and every one of those engagements with the running backs drove the running back into McCarthy one time to get a sack. In this case, down 24-17 on third down. He kind of swims over the running back and then is able to get into McCarthy's face, or basically front him up. McCarthy tries to escape, and he essentially is funneled into Aiden Hutchinson, probably one of the lightest or cheapest sacks, if you will, that Hutchinson has had in his career. But he's got 200 pressures in 2025 or 24 and 25 together, whatever it is. He's also been held a number of times and not called, so you'll take it. You certainly won't turn it down. When they forced the punt with 13 minutes left, I don't know about you, like the crowd's into it. Hutchinson just got the sack on McCarthy. Despite knowing that Minnesota had played a better brand of football pretty much throughout and could have been up, they could have been up 31-17 on the kick return if there's no penalty perhaps. I thought that, okay, there's an opportunity here to go down and win the game. There's an opportunity, and we knew that Campbell was probably gonna go for it in fourth down situations, right? I do want to digress for one moment. Jack Campbell, I thought, played another elite football game. He did, in my opinion, possibly miss a coverage, the one on Aaron Jones when there's 2 running backs in the backfield. It's the first, second down and 15 that Minnesota faced. So you've got a clear example of O'Connell having plays in his pocket that he wants to use in certain situations. I think that Campbell and Anzalone should have been able to handle those running backs switching, but, I don't know the coverage. Obviously, it's just my suspicion. Knowing his quality of play and how high he's been performing in 2025, and even before that. In any case, Campbell finished with 9 tackles. He did get another sack. I think that's his 4th of the year. He's called for one of the worst roughing penalties that I've ever seen. It's disgusting, the lack of physicality that, well, they basically are telling those guys on defense, you really can't hit the quarterback in the same way that it happens at every other level, number one, and that it's always occurred. It was a great blitz in the second quarter. It's a 2nd and 9. And I think Tom Brady covered it well, that the Vikings end up getting rewarded for poor pass protection, or really no pass protection. Campbell, great timing on the blitz. He didn't spike McCarthy. He didn't fall. I almost use a curse word. It's gravity. You can't defy gravity. When you're making a tackle, at some point, you guys are going to go to the ground. That's the definition of a tackle. The game's being ruined. That's obvious by these calls, one at a time. And I do want to compare it to one that happened to C.J. Stroud today. Caused a concussion for Stroud. I think he's sliding, and it's far more violent, the hit, the collision. It's not in the pocket. He's advancing forwards. I think he's taking a slide. They removed the penalty on the Broncos. Maybe Stroud didn't slide in the same manner. I can't believe. I thought the announcer in the booth, whoever it is, was complete horseshit explanation by him. Instead of taking a stand and saying this is not a penalty, because it's really no longer football at that point. But in any case, that's not the play that I was describing and talking about. I wanted to use it to illustrate, my thoughts on the matter. Number one, number two, I still think Jack Campbell played a spectacular football game once again. He, of course, forced Hutchinson, or gave Hutchinson the opportunity, I should say, to get that sack with about 13 minutes left in the game. Hutch's only sack of the game, but at least 5 or 6 pressures, if not more. He was giving everyone problems, left tackle, right tackle. So Goff and company get the ball back with a 7-point deficit. They convert a 4th and 2. They get down to Minnesota's 23 or 24. And then they're actually called for 2 more penalties, which is crazy. St. Brown goes out with an injury, and they line up for a 4th and 5 with St. Brown off the field. I don't know about you, but I was thinking, please don't snap this football. Kick it, get down 24-20. Defense is playing well, not great, but playing well enough to get some stops. Hopefully get you the ball back, and you can go down and win. And they certainly were not going for it on that particular 4th and 5. If Minnesota didn't jump, and it was a great hard count by Goff, if Minnesota didn't jump, I suspect they're not going to snap the ball. They kicked the field goal. Maybe we have a different outcome. Who knows? But Goff drew them off sides, which was amazing at the 14. It's about 8:10 left, somewhere around there, 8 minutes left. And you're in business, right? You got a new set of downs, been pressured, hurried all day, harassed. The pass protection has faltered, been, basically disrupted up the middle. It wasn't like edge defenders were winning consistently against the tackles. I did think Decker lost twice, one of which resulted in a sack. And then you have the block kick. That's just, again, just like the kick return late in the third quarter. I think the last play of the third quarter, the 99-yard returner by Price, the block kick just, you see it occur, and it's just not what I expect to happen with this Lions football team. I get it. They've just come out of a bye, so you certainly would not foresee those types of things when you're favored by so much. Just another piece of today's loss that you kind of can't believe the team you're watching because the quality of the guys out there on the field. I get it. The NFL is a week-by-week thing, supposedly, but that just doesn't mean, or that doesn't encapsulate the fact that we can be upset and frustrated when a team is not playing to their standard. And today, they weren't. Detroit did not live up to the standard they have for their talent level and for the commitment that so many guys have. I get it. They were able to fight and pull within 27-24. There's like a little less than 2 minutes left. It's a brilliant catch by Jamison Williams up the left sideline. I certainly would like to see a little bit more of that from Goff and Williams. He's going up against Isaiah Rodgers, he's had an all-pro, borderline MVP, a defensive MVP type season in 2025. He didn't block the kick. He ended up with the ball in his hands there on the block kick when it's 24-17. They're able to push it to 27-17. He's the guy who's guarding Jamison Williams on that touchdown. It's a great throw from Goff. Spectacular play by Williams up the left sideline. Stayed in bounds. Really incredible. And I think there probably will be some comments maybe about the 2-minute situation where they run the ball on the 2nd and 1. Gibbs doesn't get it, and they end up kind of wasting the 2-minute warning, if you want to put it that way. But I'm also sympathetic or understanding that St. Brown was out during that time. So I wonder if some of those calls and those situations are because they're trying to get the right guys in the game for St. Brown, who's always on the field. And it certainly wasn't smooth. I'm not saying that it was, but that particular moment, I'm a little sympathetic because of the fact that St. Brown had to come off the field. And then I believe after the penalty, the 4th and 5, he tried to come back on, but no play had officially occurred, so the ref sent him off. Globally, there was a lot of problems today. And I don't think J.J. McCarthy was the biggest part of this. Yes, the scramble is one that sticks out for how they've defended athletic quarterbacks so far this year for the most part. He had the touchdown to Jefferson on the first possession. It's a great throw. It's not really a fade or a back shoulder play. It's like a little bit of both. It's a strike. It's a hard throw. And I mean, Jefferson makes a great catch. I think it's against Amik. He also had the second one to Hawkinson in the middle of the end zone, who's wide open. But he's just not as big a factor here, in my opinion, as the defense. I think that's the stronger side for Minnesota, and they came with something to prove today, in my opinion. Goff had really shredded Flores' defense the last 4 times they met, 2023 and 2024. Today, different story, right? Sacked 5 times, pressured probably more than 10 or 12 or 14 times. Now, Goff did finish, I believe, 25 of 37. There it is on your guys' screen right there. 25 of 37 for above 280 himself. But because of the sacks, it's down to 240. So the 5 sacks resulted in, I think, 42 or maybe 45 yards lost. That's a big factor. He did have the 2 touchdowns, in my opinion. His true talent, one of his true talents, wasn't able to shine today, and that's the recognizing things pre-snap, getting the team in the right look, or probably knowing where he's going to go with the football because of the concept that's called, the routes, and the coverage that the Vikings are playing. I feel like Flores and the defense changed some things up. I cannot prove that. I may not be able to prove that at all in film study videos. Only really Goff and the offensive staff for the Lions and Flores and his staff and players would know it. That's just my observation for you, and perhaps it's too simplistic. But I understand they brought the same inside linebacker stunt 5 or 6 times, 2 of which resulted in sacks. In my opinion, it seemed like early on they were lining up to make it look like a blitz, and then a guy would drop out early, like a safety would run out, and I think they wanted Goff to see that. In my opinion, I know that I observed this 3 different times, where they're lined up with 5 or 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, and one safety like creeps back, and then all of a sudden another one like flies out of there. And so you think, okay, 2 guys have dropped out of here, probably looking at a too high safety look, and they still bring 5. And so I think they did a really great job on defense for Minnesota of not just presenting Goff different looks from post-snap to pre-snap, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this well, actually showing him a portion of that before the ball was snapped. And that probably doesn't make sense or sounds like a paradox. I think some of those safeties running out of there was Minnesota showing Goff, hey, you don't know what this is, and you've already committed to snapping the football 2 seconds from now. That's the best way that I can explain it at this time. I would almost kind of compare that to one of the chess matches we saw with Goff and the Flores defense last year in Minnesota. If you recall, it's the touchdown to St. Brown up the right hash in Minnesota, like I said, where Goff kind of reloads the play twice and intentionally just seems to be moving guys around to see what the Vikings' reaction is. I think Flores and his staff kind of returned the favor a little bit today. Like I said, can't prove it. And look, Goff, numbers-wise, are good, right? And he fought. He got the last touchdown to Williams to pull him in within 3 points. And I understand this. Some of you will not share my optimism for this next statement, and that's, I do believe that if the defense was able to get a stop there in the last minute or 2 minutes, that Goff is able to get this team down to compete for a touchdown or game-winning field goal. They may not actually get it, but he's that quality of quarterback to me when I've watched him play in the last couple of years. He didn't get the chance, right, because Minnesota did a nice job on offense identifying a matchup edge. I like Arthur Millette. He played for the Ravens in 2023. He was a good nickel DB for us, probably better as a blitzer than he is in coverage. He played spectacular against the Bucs, right, in that win a couple of weeks ago, but he's not a great coverage nickel. Because of injuries, he's forced to be out there. I understand it. It's the third. I'm talking about the 3rd and 5 with like a minute and 45 left. McCarthy goes to, I think it's Jalen Naylor against him, and he comes down with the catch, right, clinches the game. A lot of things had to happen for this all to occur, some of them very small, and they just build up. It's a nice matchup edge that Minnesota has there, Naylor against Millette. Detroit probably didn't have too many other options, guys they could put in. Maybe a Whiteside. I'm not being critical of that. I'm just illustrating that a lot of small things had to go the Vikings' way, and I think many of them were because they were playing downhill. They were the more physical team. They were certainly more committed to stopping the run, and then they were very sound in pass coverage, generally not giving up the big play, except for the 40-yarder to Laporta on the first possession, and then the touchdown to Williams that I already kind of talked about. They have two inside linebackers that played just spectacular. Eric Wilson, he did have 6 tackles, only 6 tackles, but 2 sacks, brought consistent pressure up the middle, made a couple of plays out in space. Cashman had the forced fumble, also game high, 14 tackles. Andrew Van Ginkel didn't have any sacks today that I'm aware of, or quarterback pressures necessarily, but he had a pair of tackles on screens, and to me just looks like a guy that if you're going to throw it out there to that side, I think Goff even mentioned it, or Brady talked about it, that you got to worry about Van Ginkel like getting his hands up and possibly making a play on the ball. Another element here that I'd like to describe to you and offer is, again, something I can't prove. Perhaps I could get into the numbers a little bit when the All-22 End Zone Angle film comes out. I think the Vikings were blitzing a lot with the inside linebackers when Gibbs is in the game. I'm not saying he's not good in pass pro. I think Montgomery's probably better. But I think they wanted him to face a ton of blitzes as opposed to getting out into the flats in some of his routes. Part of me wonders if it wasn't intentional. Basically, Wilson and Cashman, one or both of them, are going to be downhill on a blitz, and we're going to make him get in pass pro. Otherwise, we're going to get pressure on Goff right up the middle. It seemed to me that they were not, and it could have something to do with the guards and the center, sure, no problem. I understand that as well. They made the Lions' offensive line protect in a different way. I think it's possible Flores and the staff there valued pressure up the middle a little bit more than pressure off the edges with, Van Ginkel, Grenard, who's a spectacular football player as well. Detroit still gets over 300 yards of offense, right? But they had to fight to get there. Only averaged 4.9 yards per play, way down from their season averages, and especially what we expect the last 2 or 3 years. Only produced 15 first downs, just an uphill climb. It was an uphill climb when the entire offensive line was healthy today, right? When they started to go down, I think it's Decker first, and then Radledge, and then finally Mahogany, it was very ominous. They were still able to get stops on defense in the third quarter. To start the second half, Kelvin Shepard's group gets stops on 3 out of 4 possessions. Then Minnesota ends up blocking the field goal. They get the short field. In my opinion, Shepard's group tightened up and kind of matched, or tried to match, I should say, the intensity of the Vikings defense. Final score 27-24, doesn't portray it, but I think we have 2 defenses that outplay the offenses, for the most part today. It's a really unfortunate loss because McCarthy doesn't really produce much. 143 passing yards, 14 completed passes. He was able to convert that third down late in the game and then take a knee. I think they were 9 or maybe 10-point underdogs, something like that. I don't care about gambling at all, but that's just to illustrate how many people favored the Lions, rightfully so, but sloppy play overall, inability to block their front in the run game or deal with them in pass pro. Could not have predicted it for real, at least myself. I don't know about you or anyone else, especially because of how Minnesota had been playing defense, right? They gave up 200 rushing yards last week to the Chargers, but there were some guys who didn't play recently and then have come back. I think Van Ginkel was one of them. I think Cashman missed a couple of games, although I do believe he played last week. I could be wrong. They're back healthy and certainly look like themselves on defense. They've evened their record at 4-4, and really played spectacular. Coming out for a Detroit offense that had them handled for the last 2 years. Have to give them credit. Have to give Flores credit. I'm not sure that I'm the biggest fan of some of the things they do on defense, but it certainly works out for them more often than not. Generally, Goff's been able to exploit some of those things they do that perhaps a little bit less sound. The fumble by Montgomery hurts a lot. Coming out of the halftime where you're already down, Detroit goes punt, 3 and out. Then the fumble by Montgomery. So you've got 6 plays, no first downs recorded, and that allows Minnesota to get up 24-14. I feel like the defense for Detroit was put at a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Vikings. Like I said, I've got a lot of respect for Flores and what they do. But the Lions were not able to take advantage of things like they have in the past. And now you're looking at a road game against the Commanders next week at 5-3, with the offense not operating at full speed. Consistency is lacking. Describe it however you wish. There didn't seem to be any real feel on how to attack Minnesota today. Is the Commanders' defense as complex looking, as confusing at times as Minnesota's? No, it's not. They're more traditional, fundamental, but maybe they look at some of the things on film and try to copy it. Goff, other than hitting Laporta 3 times on the first possession, right? The 40-yard touchdown caps it on the 4th and 4. That was all misleading because they're forced to punt on 5 of their next 6 possessions. So were it not for the 4th down conversion to Laporta, basically finding a cheat code on the first possession, the first drive, getting the ball to Laporta to the right, into the boundary, they get stopped on 5 of their next 6 possessions. John Morton's got to figure a way to make things smoother, obviously, but tighten things up, no penalties, and be more physical. So there's a lot to handle this week for Detroit, which sounds crazy. They have generally not been in this situation. And now there's added on top of all that is the offensive line concerns or worries. Decker battled through this one, right? He came back. Radledge also returned. I think it was an elbow or something like that. Mahogany had to be carted off. And somehow Dan Campbell already knows that he'll be out till late December. Don't ask me to explain that one. Like, no idea how you coach a game and then for the press conference, it seems silly to me, to be direct, to offer a specific time frame that can be alarming. You can just say, we think he's going to be out for a while, But in any case, there's questions about the offensive line. How do you patch things together? I think that it seems clear to me or obvious that you make a call to Tennessee and see what it would take to get Kevin Seitler. He played in this offense last year. Granted, he played right guard, and that's where Tate Radledge is playing. Tennessee's having an abomination of a season. It just would make sense. The integration of Zeitler would be quicker, faster, smoother than it would be with pretty much most other guards, in my opinion. That the concerns about the trade deadline or perhaps desires or wants probably shifted after this game because the Vikings were so physical and beat up the offensive line. So I get it. And even 4 or 5 guys in the Discord before the game were talking about, hey, I'd like to possibly secure a backup left tackle. Not that teams give away good tackles very often, but I understand that. But coming out of this situation now, I absolutely would understand people having that opinion. How concerned are you with the offense? Consistency, ability to generate run plays, get things accomplished, set up high percentage situations. I think I am officially in that, the Vikings were able to come in and dominate physically and tactically. Morton was put on the back foot. Punts on 5 out of 6 possessions in the first half, other than the opening drive touchdown to Laporta. You're 5-3. You got a road game against the Commanders. The Commanders host the Seahawks later tonight, so who knows how that occurs. Then you're at the Eagles before 3 consecutive road games. I think Morton has got to look at the process of things, how they integrate the run game and the pass game together successfully. It didn't seem smooth today at all. Again, I'm willing to give credit and praise Flores and his side for that. I wish it didn't happen, but have to reflect on the reality that we watched unfold today. I have no idea if Morton's offense is as predictable as other people claim it is, but the 1st and 10 run plays really didn't get much of anything accomplished. The 1st and 10 run plays were often shut down for 1 or 2 yards. Conversely, Minnesota, the 29 carries for 142 yards compared to just 65 for Detroit. And that's got to be fixed. They're too talented to be one-dimensional, especially early in the game. I will say or offer that in their 3 losses in 2025, the Lions have been held to less than 100 yards rushing in each case on the ground. 42 or 46 against the Packers, 98 in the road loss to the Chiefs, and now 65 at home today. The O-line is concerning because of the injuries and the inability to get the run game going, whether it's gap or zone schemes. So I think the trade possibilities probably shift to O-line, whether it's a starter or just a quality backup or someone with some versatility. I don't know. You got 2 days until the deadline. Well, I guess a little bit less than 48 hours as I record this. It's about 6 p.m. when I do so. The deadline, I think, is Tuesday at 4 p.m. So who knows? It's a tough week for the coaching staff. I do expect them to respond. That's what Dan Campbell's team has done consistently. How well could they even integrate someone new? I'm not sure. I think it's got to be someone that's obviously playing a lot of snaps and could move into this offense quickly. To me, Zeitler seems like a natural thought to look into, like now, to be honest with you. In any case, I had some first half notes. Arnold, I thought, was playing solid football in the first half. The interception was amazing. It prevented the Vikings from being able to double up. But it was, then wasted by the offense that was unable to capitalize. The Lions were only averaging 4.1 yards per play in the first half. They punted on 5 of their last 6 possessions, as I mentioned. Goff was only 11 of 18 passing. He'd only been sacked once at that time through 30 minutes, but you could see it. You could see that the pass protection was an issue. Detroit had no running game at all through 30 minutes. Gibbs and Montgomery, they combined for 25 yards on 10 carries. And, once the run game is removed as an option, pass pro was exploited through 30 minutes, got even worse in the second half. I thought that Minnesota came in with a good game plan on defense. Have to give credit to them. To me, I have a level of concern 4 out of 10. I recognize that yours may be worse. Yours might be 8 out of 10. Yours might, possibly be even worse because of the injuries. That will be fine. They have a difficult upcoming schedule, and the O-line instability causes added worry or anxiety probably, given what we witnessed today. Every team's not like the Vikings. I suspect that Flores made some tactical adjustments in what they do from pre-snap to post-snap. I tried to offer you a couple of explanations for it, or I should say at least describing to you what I think I observed. Once I get the film in my hands, I'll try to be a little bit better about that, for tomorrow morning or perhaps into Monday afternoon. I appreciate you guys' time, man. If you sat through the whole reaction video, I recognize that it's difficult to do so I want to thank you for that. If you think other Lions fans would enjoy my thoughts, or at least like to hear what I have to say about the 27-24 loss to the Vikings that was ultimately very disappointing and frustrating to sit through, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.